You're listening to the Monday Night Community Show with Daniel on BRFM.
This is the Daniel Monday Night Community Show on demand through YouTube. Thank you very much for choosing to listen to us through this method. If you'd like to keep up to date with when I add new interviews, then subscribe to this channel. Our next guest in the studio is our regular visitor, Lauren, with our regular book club book review. Each month we review and look at a different book. Lauren, as always, it's great to have you back here in the studio.
Thanks for having me back, Daniel, and Happy New Year.
Yes, and to you as well. So let us know what this month's book is, and of course our listeners who have been following it, they already know and hopefully have had a little go at reading it as well.
Yeah, so this month we have been reading Spectacles, which is a memoir by Sue Perkins. I picked an autobiography because I think, like, just historically, people are used to getting autobiographies for Christmas, and I always tend to read a couple of autobiographies at the early part of the year and then don't tend to read so many throughout the year. So I thought this would be a really great time to read an autobiography, and this one in particular, Spectacles by Sue Perkins, I really, really loved it. I really enjoyed it. So it's Sue Perkins' autobiography. So Sue Perkins is a television personality, and she's one half of Mel and Sue, who are famous for many things. I think it goes into detail in the book about how they did a chat show on Channel 4 called Light Lunch, and then a later one called Later Lunch, inventive. And she's also a comedian, and then obviously now they're most famous for hosting the Bake Off. The book itself is so funny. It's got some really, really funny moments in there. Her depiction of her mum and dad in particular is just hilarious. She's really, really takes her mum and dad off very well. Her mother she calls a master catastrophizer. That was a mouthful. And she just makes a mountain out of every single molehill there is. And her dad is absolutely obsessed with facts and writes everything down. He's got a diary and he's written everything down since he's been about 14, and he keeps all these diaries, and the way she writes it is just so funny. But at the same time, there's really sad moments in there as well. So there's, for instance, in the book, and I know this was also released in a newspaper as well, there's an open letter to her dog who she had to have put down because he had cancer, and that bit was just absolutely heartbreaking. I was in tears reading that. So it's really like a book with so many different things in it. It's got life, love and loss in it, and it's just written beautifully. She's so eloquent, and the language she uses is really interesting, and the way she describes things is just perfect. And it also, there's certain parts in the book which are laid out really nicely. So some of the interactions between characters, conversations she has with her parents, are laid out like a sort of script, which really makes for an easy and pleasant read. I personally asked for this as a birthday present because I love Great British Bake Off, and I find Sue Perkins really funny. I've seen her on a few things. I watched a documentary of her going to India, and I thought that was really interesting. But I would recommend this to anyone. I just find it so funny. I think a lot of people would be able to enjoy this, reading this, which is something a bit strange because I'm going to come to that a bit later on about how people come about reading the autobiographies that they do read. But in particular, I think this one could be read by anyone. And also, it's a beautiful book to look at. I know we can't look at it now because we're on the radio, but it is beautiful, and it's got really lovely end papers, and it's just really lovely and nicely put together. And yeah, I loved it, Daniel.
Well, I think actually you're going to talk about autobiographies in general now.
Yeah, so as I said earlier, I find that January and early in the year I read a lot more autobiographies because they're always around at Christmas. Obviously, they bring out a lot, and they do the hard sell on all the chat shows around Christmas for Christmas presents. But I looked into the popularity of autobiographies because I thought I had noticed in shops and things that there was less autobiographies on sale than there used to be, and I'm right. They're actually much less popular than they used to be. I found some information on the Guardian website, and it shows that the autobiographies actually make up 0.58% of the nation's reading, which isn't that much at all if you think about it. I also looked into best-selling autobiographies just to see, just because I was interested to see if I'd read any of them myself. And I managed to find some information on the Guardian website again. This is the best-selling autobiographies between 2001 and 2013, so not entirely up to date information, but quite up to date. And the best-selling autobiography is quite a famous book called A Child Called It by Dave Pelzer, which I believe, I'm not sure I've read it myself, but it rings a bell, and it's about a boy brought up at the hands of abuse, so not a very cheery book, but that sells an average of 250 copies per day. So every day they're selling 250 copies of that, and the value that they've made from that is £5.5 million just from one autobiography. I've also got a list of some names here in the top sort of 50. Peter Kay's got 2 there, President Obama, Dawn French has also got 2, David Beckham, Russell Brand's got 2 in the top, Katie Price has got a number, Ant and Dec, they're also there, Alan Carr, and Cheryl Cole. So Cheryl Cole's in particular, so although hers, so the top selling one, which is a Child Called It, although that sells 250 copies a day, that's been out for a fair few years. So Cheryl Cole's only came out in something like 2011, and has sold, so in that period, 2,308 copies a day. So it's obviously very, very popular. So I find that they're not as popular as they used to be, and I wonder if that's got something to do with Twitter, and the fact that celebrities sort of get everything out there on Twitter, and I wonder if it's more of a hard slog for people to sit down and read through an entire autobiography. I don't mind reading them if I find the right one. I really like it, but sometimes it is a bit like a celebrity just sort of blowing their own trumpet for 500 pages, and I don't know how well I'll get on with that. But in general, they're big money, and they're big money sellers, so you can see why they do it.
So you could tell us about autobiographies that people like to read, or what they like to read.
Yeah, so I put out on my Facebook and Twitter pages asking some people what autobiographies they like to read, and it was very clear to see that it's a very personal choice. I got a lot of different books in the answers. I got people from Barack Obama and Sir Ranulph Fiennes and some sports people, all the way down to Charlotte Crosby from Geordie Shore. It was a really, really personal choice. So the majority of people that got back to me were male, which I found quite surprising, actually, that a lot of and the girls that got back to me said, "Oh, I don't read autobiographies, I much prefer fiction." So it's obviously, and I think maybe the autobiography market is sort of marketed towards male. A lot of sports autobiographies and sort of adventure people, for instance, they do a lot of people who sort of go to the North Pole or something like that. There'll be autobiographies. A few of the autobiographies that people told me that they'd read, the first one is one that I'm actually going to read at some point this year, and that's I Am Malala by Malala Yousafzai, which she is the activist for the right to education, and particularly female education. She won the Nobel Peace Prize. I also got a few that people were interested in. Kenneth Williams' diaries, Mad, Bad and Dangerous to Know by Sir Ranulph Fiennes, as I mentioned earlier, Me by Charlotte Crosby, the series of Paul O'Grady autobiographies. I think he's done a number of them now. Camp David by David Walliams. A few sports ones I've got here. Lifting the Covers by Alan Mills, and he is he was a one of the guys at Wimbledon. What do they call them? Umpires. Serious by John McEnroe, Between the Lines by Victoria Pendleton, and Open by Andre Agassi. And me and you were talking earlier, Daniel, and we were saying about how Chris Evans has got a good series of autobiographies. He's got 3 out at the moment, so it's Not What You Think, Memoirs of a Fruitcake, and Call the Midlife. And I think he's had quite a busy life, so they're quite good. They're quite good to read. So, as you can see from the choices given, it's clear to see that the reason people read autobiographies is because they have an interest in the person writing them or the subject that they're covering. For example, football managers' autobiographies or pop stars that they like. And when I was younger, I used to read autobiographies, sort of like the pop stars I liked. I read all the Spice Girl ones, I read Russell Brand ones, and before I found sort of my niche in reading and what I enjoyed to read, I sort of thought that autobiographies were the only option for reading because that was all I had access to. So yeah, I think it's just clear to see that there's a real wide range, and people read what they like, and people read the people that they know.
we're covering our book for this month. We've also been covering about autobiographies in general, and I was hoping you could let us and our listeners know what next month's book's going to be.
So next month we're going to be discussing and talking about Grandpa's Great Escape, which is by David Walliams and is a children's book, and I thought it would be a really nice opportunity to talk about children's books in general. I've always got loads to say about Roald Dahl, who was my favourite author when I was younger, and I just thought it would be a really nice time to chat about children's books. So if anybody has got any children's book that they love reading, then do get in touch with me and let me know, because I'd love to have a little look at them all before next time. But I will just read out the bump on the back of the Grandpa's Great Escape by David Walliams. It says here, in his old age, Grandpa has become confused. He believes he's back in World War II when he was an RAF Spitfire pilot. Only one person can understand him, his grandson Jack. Together they embark on the adventure of their lives. And I've been listening to this on audiobook so far. I've got my copy now. I got it out from the library. And the audiobook is absolutely brilliant. It's read by David Walliams, and also Michael Gambon does the voice of Grandpa. And David Walliams' range of voices are just amazing, and it's such fun to listen to. So I'd really recommend it. Before I've even finished it, I'm really enjoying it.
And I was hoping you could refresh our listeners firstly what our book's going to be for next month, and also go over any useful contact details and cover your booktube channel as well.
Oh, of course. So next month I will be here on the 15th of February at 8 o'clock as usual, and we will be discussing Grandpa's Great Escape by David Walliams and children's books in general. And my mum has already been in contact. She is a primary school teacher, and she's going to find out from her class what their favourite books are. So that's really, really helpful. So if anybody else is in that sort of position and can find out what children's favourite books are at the moment, I'd be really, really interested to hear. As I said, my contact details are laurenandthebooks@gmail.com. You can also contact me on Twitter, and my tag is @LaurenTheBooks. And I've also got a YouTube channel, which is www.youtube.com/Lauren and the Books. And most recently on there, I've upped my video to 2 a week. Before, in 2015, I was doing every Sunday and the first of each month, and now I'm doing every Wednesday and Sunday, so that's double the YouTube videos. And my most recent video has a very special guest of my boyfriend on there, and we're talking about reading habits. So I consider myself quite a seasoned reader and read quite a lot, and I thought I would offer some tips for people who want to be able to read a lot. And David, my boyfriend, is on there sort of offering tips for people who just want to get into reading. And I just found it a really enjoyable video to watch, and I've had quite a lot of feedback on it of people finding it very handy, so that's definitely worth checking out.
Well, if you're happy we've covered everything.
I think so.
As always, thank you very much for coming along, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks, Daniel. I'll see you in February.